Gaza Humanitarian Foundation suspends operations, citing direct threats from Hamas. Iranian intelligence reports seizure of large cache of sensitive Israeli documents, including thousands on nuclear project. And US President Trump praises the National Guard for response to LA unrest after immigration raids. Good afternoon and welcome to Q News. I'm Mark Summers. As Muslims around the world celebrate Eid al-Adha, children in Gaza marked the occasion surrounded by the devastation of war. Once filled with outings to parks, beaches and family gatherings, this holiday has taken on a more somber tone. With homes destroyed and lives upended, many families now spend Eid without traditional meals, gifts or celebrations. Despite the hardship, children were seen playing on makeshift swings and trampolines amid the ruins, a small attempt to reclaim joy in a battered city. Thousands of Israelis took to the streets in weekly protests calling for the immediate release of detainees held by Hamas and criticizing the ongoing conflict in Gaza. Demonstrators gathered at multiple locations, holding banners condemning Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his government. Many displayed photos of some of the 55 detainees who remain captive in Gaza. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has suspended operations, citing direct threats from Hamas. That's according to the US and Israel-backed group. The organization had planned to reopen 2 aid centers in Rafah on Sunday, but its earlier announcement was removed from Facebook. The aid initiative, supported by the United States and Israel, has drawn criticism. UN Secretary General spokesman called the plan a recipe for disaster earlier this week. The death toll in Gaza's conflict has reached 54,880, with 126,227 injured. That's since October 7th, 2023. The Health Ministry reported in the past 24 hours alone, at least 108 Palestinians were killed and 393 injured in Israeli attacks across Gaza. Since Israel broke the ceasefire in March, 4,600 Palestinians have been killed and more than 14,000 injured. Now, for more on this, to our newsroom, Selma Al-Fiqi is there with us. Selma.
Hi, Mark. Thank you. So, for further analysis on the matter, Mohammed Azzuddin, al-Ahram managing editor from Cairo, is joining us. Welcome to Q News, sir. How does the repeated use of lethal force against civilians seeking aid affect the accountability of military operations under international humanitarian law, please?
Thank you so much for having me on Q News. Certainly, the humanitarian aid distribution process is completely flawed. In addition to the chaos taking place with the very limited humanitarian aid distribution, today only one box was dedicated to each Palestinian family, and each Palestinian family has a lot of members. And today, there was a halt on the distribution, and it was reopened in the morning in one center in central Gaza. And we have seen a lot of martyrs falling in the first and second days of Eid. More than 100 killed and 550 injured. There is a great inefficiency in the aid distribution process on the starved Palestinians. In addition to the insufficiency, they are using maps to displace and evacuate the populations towards certain paths, in addition to shooting them and opening fire, as what happened this morning after the occupation forces said that the road should have been secure. They opened fire. This inefficiency, in addition to the political use of the distribution points to serve the redeployment plans of the occupation forces, is completely in violation to the international law. In addition to targeting the hundreds of the Palestinians seeking aid, this must stop. And
Mr. Izzeddin, what, in your opinion, do you think maybe? Let's move on to the next question, Mr. Izzeddin, if I may. What are the, in your opinion, do you think, are the structural or the logistical failures within the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and aid distribution systems that have contributed to the deadly incidents and aid delays, do you think?
First, the number of distribution points is not enough. Second, the geographic distribution of such points is not based on any population density basis. Third, they are using the distribution points as indicators to detect the citizens and allege that they are a threat to the forces. And fourth, they open fire on women and children and civilians seeking humanitarian aid. And finally, the inefficiency and the chaos happening. All of these reasons caused the continuation of the Palestinian suffering and the insufficiency and the systematic targeting of civilians is also ongoing. This requires adjusting the map and leveraging the expertise of the international organizations actually concerned with aid distributions, and not using these aid points to circulate red papers.
How do you think, sir, do the fuel restrictions and the attacks on the aid seekers reflect maybe broader strategies of siege warfare?
Certainly, these increase the tragedy, and as the catastrophe worsens, not only the fuel crisis, but also all of the medical supplies. The fuel has only 2 days to run out from the entire Gaza Strip. The occupation forces is halting any entry of fuels or any fuel to run generators. Also, the very long walk distances for entire families to only obtain one box of humanitarian aid, in addition to the threat to their lives because of the random shooting on the civilians taking aid. Of course, all of this worsens the humanitarian tragic situation the Palestinian people is going through. In addition to the chaos and the halt and reopening and the complete control of the occupation forces on the distribution points described by the Palestinians as US points managed by armed soldiers, which is also a violation to international treaties which impose a certain form of international staff, especially concerned with humanitarian relief.
How do you think, sir, does the collapse of the healthcare infrastructure in Gaza influence the overall humanitarian crisis?
Of course, the impact is worsening day by day with the fuel almost running out from hospitals and medical centers. There is also the problem of the supplies shortages and the red papers or the evacuation orders that prevents the injured from heading to hospitals and therefore the death toll increases. There are always injuries that can actually be treated, but the occupation forces would not allow the injured to head to any hospitals, in addition to actually opening fire on ambulances and medical centers. Therefore, there is a difficulty to take the injured by carriages, in addition to carrying them for very long distances. This is completely inhumane and it contributes to increasing the death toll from the Palestinian people and the Gaza Strip in particular.
And in your opinion, sir, how do you think might the continued violence against the civilians gathering for aid impact a ceasefire agreement?
Of course, it's a real tragedy, and the occupation forces and the Israeli government are very insistent on this very inhumane shape of aid distribution. First, they work on displacing and evacuating the Palestinians from their places and partitioning the Gaza Strip to impose a military rule. Also, the shortage of aid points and hiring suspicious staff with military backgrounds who open actual fire on the aid civilians. There is also the non-professionality and the limited volume of humanitarian aid compared to the volume of need. Also, the families are not able to reach the distribution points, especially today after the reopening. They only opened one aid point. They were talking about 8, but today we have only seen the point in central Gaza being opened with the death of 5 Palestinians, including 2 children and 1 woman. This requires some international pressure, whether by the United Nations and other international organizations or the peace-seeking countries. We can say that Egypt is working tirelessly with exerting a lot of effort to guarantee and ensure the humanitarian aid access and getting it to Palestinians, in addition to the endeavors with Qatar and the mediators and the talks to reach a ceasefire and stopping the targeting of civilians in Gaza.
And that was Mr. Mohammed Azzeddine, al-Adha managing editor from Cairo. Thank you, sir, so much for joining us on Qnews. To Mark Summers in our studio. Mark.
Thank you very much, Salma. Thank you very much indeed. Now, the Gaza Health Ministry has warned that hospitals in the besieged enclave could become graveyards within 48 hours due to a severe fuel shortage. Director Munir al-Bursh says that the Israeli blockade preventing the fuel entry is cutting off the lifeline to hospitals. Alongside fuel shortages, there is a critical lack of medicines and medical supplies. Al-Bursh also called for immediate entry of the stranded WHO trucks near the Palestinian Rafah border crossing. He added that despite emergency plans, Gaza's healthcare system is now overwhelmed. He urged international organizations to act swiftly to break the siege and prevent a humanitarian disaster. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, has warned while an estimated 300 million nappies are sold worldwide daily, families in Gaza are facing a severe shortage. UNRWA emphasized that a steady supply of essential items such as diapers, soap and wipes is vital for the survival and health of children. The agency called for the restoration of a steady humanitarian supply chain to ensure that babies in Gaza receive the care they need. Iranian intelligence has reported it obtained a large cache of sensitive Israeli documents, including thousands related to Israel's nuclear project. State media announced that the documents were acquired some time ago, but were kept under wraps until they were securely transported and reviewed. Israeli authorities have not commented, and it remains unclear whether the documents are linked to a reported hacking of an Israeli nuclear research center last year. The disclosure comes amid heightened tensions over Iran's nuclear program and ongoing threats from the US administration. Thousands of Muslim pilgrims have gathered in Saudi Arabia's Mina Valley to perform the symbolic stoning of the devil ritual, marking the final days of the annual Hajj pilgrimage. Pilgrims throw small pebbles at 3 stone pillars known as the Jamarat. The Hajj, one of the 5 pillars of Islam, is a once-in-a-lifetime obligation for Muslims who are physically and financially able. It is one of the world's largest religious gatherings. This year's pilgrimage began on Wednesday, June 4th, and is expected to conclude on Monday, subject to the moon sighting. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has condemned the recent Russian attacks on Kharkiv, stating that they are not retaliatory but are intended to bring complete destruction of life. He emphasized that Russian forces focus on military infrastructure and looting valuable resources in occupied territories. The Ukrainian military reported that Russia launched 206 drones, 2 ballistic missiles and 7 other missiles overnight. In the evening, Russian aircraft again attacked Kharkiv with guided bombs. Zelensky reflected on over 11 years of conflict with Russia, saying the war has only brought ruins and death to Ukraine. Russian Deputy Defense Minister Alexander Fomin has said that Russia is ready for a prisoner of war exchange and to transfer the bodies of deceased Ukrainian servicemen, but is still waiting for Kyiv's consent. Fomin stated that Russian officials were sent to the Belarus-Ukraine border to coordinate the humanitarian operation, but Ukrainian representatives have yet to arrive at the meeting point. He added that the reason for the delay is unknown and expressed hope that Ukrainian authorities will soon make the necessary decisions.
Вместе с тем, до настоящего времени согласие Киева на проведение гуманитарных операций. Donald Trump is his name, and he's there to stay.
As unlikely, impossible is now reality.
We will make America powerful. We will win, win, win. quickly make America great again.
The United States now, and President Trump has praised the National Guard for its response to 2 days of unrest in Los Angeles following federal immigration raids. President Trump praised the National Guard for its response to 2 days of violence and unrest in Los Angeles, attributing the situation to failed leadership by California's Democratic officials. He also announced a new restriction, saying that masks will no longer be permitted at protests. The protests, which began on Friday, erupted in response to aggressive immigration enforcement actions, fueling tensions in the heavily Hispanic, immigrant-rich city. Furthermore, President Trump's administration has announced the deployment of 2,000 National Guard troops to LA as federal agents continue to clash with protesters following recent immigration raids. A White House statement accused California's Democratic leadership of failing to protect citizens, describing the situation as a lawless environment and calling the protests an effort to block the removal of criminal illegal aliens. Trump echoed that sentiment on Truth Social, blasting Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass, saying the federal government will step in and solve the problem if local leaders fail to act. Governor Newsom responded on X, calling the deployment purposefully inflammatory and warning it could lead to an escalation in tensions. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has said that active duty Marines at Camp Pendleton are on high alert and could be deployed if violence continues during immigration-related protests in Los Angeles. In a post on X, Hegseth condemned what he described as violent assaults on federal law enforcement, calling the unrest a national security risk driven by criminal cartels. He confirmed the immediate mobilization of the National Guard to support federal agents. The warning followed tense confrontations between protesters and federal security forces in the Paramount area, where demonstrators waved Mexican flags, and a smaller rally in downtown LA, where crowds chanted "ICE out of LA." Federal agents have confronted protesters in southeast Los Angeles, the second consecutive day of unrest following sweeping immigration raids that led to at least 44 arrests. The Department of Homeland Security claimed 1,000 rioters had surrounded a federal facility, damaged property, and attacked ICE officers. Senior White House aide Stephen Miller described the protest as an insurrection against the laws and sovereignty of the United States. President Trump has vowed to expand deportations dramatically, with ICE reportedly targeting 3,000 migrant arrests per day. And activists have gathered outside a Tesla store in New York City to protest the former Doge chief and billionaire Elon Musk, as well as US President Trump over funding cuts. Andrew Green, Chief Operating Officer of the NGO Housing Works, explained that Musk and Trump significantly influenced funding. He noted that their actions led to substantial cuts to the United States President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR, which in turn affected the international community's access to antiretrovirals. Trump froze many foreign aid programs early in the presidency before reinstating life-saving assistance. PEPFAR funding also supported NGO-run clinics, many of which have since closed. And before we go, just time to recap the main headlines this afternoon. Gaza Humanitarian Foundation suspends operations, citing direct threats from Hamas. Iranian intelligence reports seizure of large cache of sensitive Israeli documents, including thousands on nuclear project. And as you were just hearing, US President Trump praises National Guard for response to LA unrest after immigration raids. And that's all for our bulletin this hour. Don't forget you can follow Q News on our social media platforms at QNews EGY. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.